So we're at QR code 3, and the third thing I want to talk to you about is leisure. So we've done housing, we've done jobs, leisure. These are the main priorities and the main things that these immigrants were concerned about. And as I've said, many of them were young single black men. And young single men, black, Asian, white, anything, they want to enjoy themselves, especially if they've been working hard. And what they found in their leisure time is they had a bar on what they could do. So, for example, some pubs banned anybody who wasn't white from coming into the pubs. Some of them might walk in and they get a really frosty reception. So even if they're not specifically banned, it wasn't a friendly place and a nice place to go. And so why would you want to spend your time there? And they didn't. There could even be clubs, like golf clubs or tennis clubs or whatever, saying we're not having, they would term coloureds in our team. Remember, coloureds is not an acceptable term anymore, but this is what they would use at the time. So what did they do? Well, they just made their own provisions. And that caused tension, you see, because let's say you've got a group of men from the West Indies who can't go in the pubs. So what they do is they set up their own unlicensed, unregulated place to drink and to hang out. And they became associated with illegal gambling, prostitution, loud music and fighting. And it caused tension with the people in the areas where these were set up. But it was, well, not entirely. Okay, they've got to take some responsibility, these immigrants coming in and doing some of those things. That's the reputation. They weren't all like that. But maybe it wouldn't have happened if they'd have been allowed into the licensed areas and been encouraged and welcomed instead of made to feel not welcome or even banned in some cases. But it's not just pubs and clubs and sports clubs. Surprisingly, in church as well. So you come over from another country and you're sober, you don't drink, you don't really want to go and party, you just want to go to church. Well, let me read you an extract here, which really highlights it. This is from somebody called Carmel Jones, who in 1955 came to Britain and went to church. Biggest shock of all was, 1, the cold, and 2, having gone to church for the very first time. So delighted that I'm coming from an Anglican church back home, I went to join in the worship, and so I did. But after the service, I was greeted by the vicar, who politely and nicely told me, "Oh, thank you for coming, but I would be delighted if you didn't come back. My congregation is uncomfortable in the company of black people." That was the biggest shock. I was the only black person in the congregation that morning, and my disappointment, my despair went with me. I didn't say anything to anyone about it for several months after that. That is just so sad, that story. You can imagine that this man's found somewhere where it feels a bit like home and thinks, well, Christians, they're quite welcoming, they're kind. And he gets told, don't come back, we feel uncomfortable. I mean, it's heartbreaking, really. And he wasn't the only one. Of course, this happened time and again. So they're discriminated and taken advantage of in housing. They're discriminated against and kept down in jobs. And they're discriminated against in leisure time and resented because they set up their own clubs, which, granted, were a little bit unsavoury, but maybe they wouldn't have done that. And even in church, they weren't welcomed in many cases. Sad. But that's the experience of immigrants who came over to England and lived through the maybe late 40s, but mostly the 50s. There we go.